there was a really loud thunder clap just a little bit ago, so I'm hoping we don't have any interruptions with the weather too. So it looks like it's moved down more towards Ardmore, but it's still building back up a little bit this way. But I'm never going to complain about having a little bit of rain. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, there we go. All right, so
you might make sure that everybody's on mute there.
Okay, can everybody mute themselves? Let me see if I can do that for everybody. Okay, everybody muted? All right, so we're going to start today just going through some of the topics that we need to be considering for July. And there is a fact sheet that is available that is going to have all of our months with what needs to be done at that time of the season. So it's going to give you a little bit of an idea of what you need to be thinking about at that time of the year. And so I've just selected out the July topics that were listed and included on this slide. And we're going to go through several of these different topics today, but a few of them we may pick up a little bit later. But if you have questions about anything, feel free to put them in the chat, or we'll have a little bit of time for questions in just a little bit. But these fact sheets are all available online, and I can show you where you can find them when we get to the end of my presentation. So let me see. Come on and work with me. Now my slide advance isn't working. There we go. So right now, or yesterday, day before yesterday, I went out and took pictures of some of the pecan development. I'm glad I didn't wait till this morning because I would have been wet, but you can see how they're advancing. We mainly have Pawnee, Kansas, Mesonet as our main cultivars there at the research station. We do have a few other ones, but these are the main blocks. And our Kansas are doing great. The crop load is probably not as big as we had first thought. And we did have a little bit of June drop with our Kansas, but we still have a nice crop of Kansas there at the station. Our Pawnee every single terminal branch on those trees seems like have a nut cluster that has at least 5 to 7 nuts per cluster. So it is very, very loaded, overloaded. So we will be doing our crop load management, our crop thinning, the first week in August to kind of minimize some of the effects that overcropping may have on our trees. But that's a subject for August. And then Mesonet look really good. We have a large crop on our Mesonet. The nuts are sizing and everything looks great. So didn't see too much drop on those. Our Oconee and Caddo are pretty slim on the crop, and we're seeing more June drop on some of those other varieties as well. Now, the main thing that I want to talk about today is monitoring the nutrition for your trees. And we can do this 2 ways. We can do it with a soil test, and there's a number there, Plant Soil Science 2207 is the name of that fact sheet, and you can look for that online if you would like. But generally, a soil test is going to give us what we need for pre-plant fertilization. So we're going to get our soil ready before we plant. And it also is good to know what our pH is, so we can adjust our pH if necessary, and it helps with diagnosing any problems that we may have. But what is in the soil and what is in the tree is usually not the same. Sometimes our pH may be off, or we have our elements out of balance, and some of those nutrients are not available to be taken up into the tree. So instead of soil tests to say how we fertilize each year, we're going to use a leaf tissue analysis. And our fact sheet, Fertilizing Pecan and Fruit Trees, is HLA, which is Horticulture Landscape Architecture, 6232. That fact sheet is a great one to keep on hand. It talks about how to fertilize for the first 3 years after you plant a tree. It gives you just a set amount to fertilize by. And then it shows you how to do your soil amendments, how to do your leaf sampling. And then if you don't do leaf sampling, it also tells you how to fertilize trees by their age or their diameter of their tree trunks. Now, when we do leaf sampling, it measures exactly what is in that tree tissue. And we have to follow the way that it's been set up by the lab so we'll get accurate results. If we try to leaf sample in April or in August or September, our samples are not going to give us the best recommendations for our nutrients. So all through the year, the nutrients are moving throughout the tree. And so we recommend doing our leaf sampling in July. It's when the leaves are fully expanded most of the time, and it's before the nuts are really taking up a lot of those nutrients. And so July is the best time. That's when we suggest doing leaf sampling. And this represents the nutrients that are available to the tree and the ones that can be absorbed by the tree. So we know that tree, we know exactly what it's able to take up. And it's been shown that what the tree has in their elemental concentrations of those nutrients, it's very closely related to how those trees perform, how they grow, how they produce. So nutrients are very important to how they are producing. And so we're going to monitor in July for the following year's fertilizer application. So what we find out in July is going to help us for next year's planning. So when and what do we sample? Well, we begin leaf sampling the third season, and then we sample in July. And we're going to collect the middle pair of leaflets. This is a long kind of confusing statement here, but we're going to collect from the middle pair of leaflets from the middle leaf on sun-exposed shoots. I'm going to break that all down for you in just a minute. But we want to sample about 50 pair of leaflets that are representative of the orchard. If we have a tree that is unhealthy, it has some kind of disease or nutrient deficiency, we want to sample it separately than our healthy trees. We want to sample our native trees separately from our improved varieties. And if we have different soil types, we may want to sample those separately as well. After we collect those leaves, we're going to rinse them. We're going to not like soak them, but just rinse them off to remove any spray residue or dust that may be on those samples. And then we're going to lay them out and let them air dry. And then go ahead and put them in a paper sack. If we put them in plastic bags, sometimes there's a little bit of moisture and it can start to mold or mildew a little bit, and that might throw off our readings a little bit. So use a paper sack or a foliage or a forage bag, excuse me. They're kind of breathable. We're going to submit those to your local county extension educator, take them to the office, and you want to make sure that you designate whether it is a native or an improved cultivar sample, because it makes a big difference in your recommendations for fertilizer. And then there's the cost for each sample is going to be $20. But if you're thinking about applying nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium to your big orchard, and then you find out through leaf analysis that maybe it's not all needed this year, it's going to save you a lot of money. So that $20 can be a big, big saver. So let me go back to this picture. I want to show you, this is a terminal branch. It's one year growth on that tree, and it's pretty long. It's doing pretty well. But we want to look for the middle leaf that's on that new terminal shoot. And so where I'm holding that, this leaf right here, remember that pecans have compound leaves. So this entire leaf structure right here, this is a leaf, and these individual little ones are leaflets. And so we look for the middle leaf on this new growth. So this isn't about the middle of that new growth. And then we're going to select the middle pair of leaflets. And so here I've laid out that one leaf, and we don't have to remove the entire leaf from the tree. We can just select the leaflets, but we find the middle leaflets on that leaf, and those would be the two that we would select. You can just bend them back together and they'll snap off very easily. So we're collecting 50 pair. So you can walk around your tree, you can walk around your orchard randomly and select 50 pair. We'd like these to be on the outside of the tree where they have light exposure. We don't want to select these from suckers or from rootstock or anything that's a little bit different than our main cultivar of that tree. So after they're submitted, then you'll receive your results back in a couple of weeks, and they'll be sent back to your county educator, and they'll send you a copy of the results along with how to fertilize for that following season. And so what I've got here is a lot of words, I know, and we're just going to talk a little bit about what you might see on your sample. But if we send in our sample, we're going to end up with results for nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. Those all come back in percent of those nutrients in the leaf tissue. And then boron, copper, iron, manganese, zinc, and nickel will come back as parts per million. And normally we think of nitrogen and zinc being the two nutrients that we see most of the time deficient. So those are the two that we really want to keep an eye on. But if we look at these two samples, these were just chosen from my pecan management class last year, a couple that were brought in. And sample one, I don't know if this is native or improved variety, but it had 2.12% nitrogen. So if we go over to the interpretation, and you can find these listed on the pecan webpage and on the soil testing webpage as well. If you look at 2.12% on a native tree, less than 2.3 is considered low. So we would double the rate of nitrogen that was applied last year, or if none was applied, we would apply 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Now, for native and varieties, there are differences in some of the nutrient values that are recommended. Because native trees have smaller pecans, they have less value, they're sold as in-shell pecans normally. The rates are a little bit lower on nitrogen and some of the other elements. But if it was a variety tree, it would be very low, so we would double the rate again. Now on the sample number 2 that was submitted, it was 3.15% nitrogen. Now if that's a native tree, it is above normal by a lot, above normal. So we would withhold all nitrogen application that following season. Now if sample number 2 is a variety, an improved variety, if it's 3.15, it's still above normal, but we're going to decrease that fertilization, that nitrogen fertilization by 50%. Not totally stop fertilizing, but we can decrease the amount. So you can see it makes quite a bit of difference. Now, the other values in between, if it was 2.3 to 2.5, we could just continue the way we fertilized last year. And if it's more than that, we decrease the amount that we fertilize with. So it's very important to keep good records of how you fertilize, when you fertilize, what you're spraying, and all of the activities you're doing in the orchard, so you can go back and look at it for the following year. Now, for phosphorus and potassium, if we look at this sample number 1, 2.12 let's look at phosphorus at 0.10. So if it's a native tree or a variety tree, it's considered low. So we would apply 100 pounds per acre of phosphorus. And so that's what your county extension educator would advise you to do, apply 100 pounds of phosphorus. Now, sample number 2 is 2.3, or 0.23, excuse me. So that's above normal, so none would be needed. On a variety, it's still above normal, so you wouldn't need to apply any phosphorus that year. If we look at potassium, 0.64 is low. So we would apply 100 pounds per acre of potassium or phosphate, or excuse me, we would apply 100 pounds of potassium. And then on sample 2, it's 1.11. So if it's a native or variety, it would be considered normal. So none was needed. So on sample 1, our nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, we would need to apply all of those nutrients in for the following season. Sample number 2, it doesn't need any of those. So depending on if it's an improved variety or a native, we may need to apply nitrogen, but not phosphorus and potassium. I didn't add the other recommendations because it would just take up too much time, but you're always able to go and look at these interpretations on either the soil testing site or the Pecan webpage. I will point out that zinc is our number that we like to be at is 60. So this sample, number 1, it really needs to concentrate on applying zinc more readily next season. Now, when we see numbers like this of 150 and up like that, a lot of the time those numbers may be, it may be contaminated. So may not have rinsed them off after they applied a zinc spray or something. So they may not be that high, but still they need to watch their zinc. The next topic I want to talk about is graft aftercare. And so I've had a couple of people ask, about this around the state. And so after we do our grafts, we need to not just leave them. We need to kind of babysit them and take care of them. And so if we look at, this was one that was grafted, it's fairly new, and it's pushed out this one shoot. Sometimes we'll end up with this bud right here sending out a secondary shoot. So we may have multiple shoots coming from that same position. If we do, that's a good time to go ahead and pinch off that additional shoot that's going to be pushing and competing with our main shoot that we want. Now, sometimes on this graft wood, we may have multiple shoots that will push. We want to select the most vigorous and leave it as our central leader, the one we're going to train, and then the other ones we can come back and pinch out this growing point. We don't have to remove the entire shoot because it's providing photosynthase for the rest of the growth, but just pinching out that will have less competition. Another thing I wanted to talk about on this picture is we have one of the shoots from the rootstock that's coming up over the top of this graft. We want to make sure that nothing is shading our graft union, so we may want to cut this back. Maybe not remove it totally that first year, but cut it back so it's not competing with our graft. We can also, like in this picture, on the right, it's got a bird perch here. And so we may want to loosely tie some of these shoots to our bird perch so it doesn't get blown out when we have windstorms. Another thing that we want to consider is all of those shoots down below on the rootstock, we may not want to remove them all the first year. If we have a lot of growth in our graft wood, our new shoots, we may want to leave them to absorb some of that energy from the root system to slow our graft growth down a little bit. But it's important to make sure that we don't have any competition or rubbing on our new graft. So in late July and August, we can remove our baggie and our foil, rubber bands and things. We can remove that from our grafts. And if we're using duct tape, like in this middle picture, we just want to make sure that we slice that all the way down so it can, as the tree is expanding, it will go ahead and expand and eventually fall off as well. So if we left that intact, it could cause some girdling to the tree. But our training for our tree begins that first year. We want to make sure that if we do have more rootstock limbs down below our graft, that over the next 2 or 3 years that we remove all of those because they'll be different than our grafted portion of the tree. So that's, I usually, when the branches get to be an inch or a little bit larger, then I'll go ahead and remove them. So here's a couple of pictures that I've received The left picture shows they haven't done a lot of graft care to this picture, and so there's a lot of competition. Looks like a lot of shading, so it needs some help. And so if we don't do much to our grafts that first year and let them just go into the winter, you can see this one had 2 grafts put on one rootstock. And if they left them both, it would end up having a weak area, kind of like a crow's foot, where we'd have 2 coming off at the same spot. We'd end up with, in between these, it would grow together, have an area for rot. And about the time that tree was ready to start producing, we may end up having it split all the way to the ground and lose that tree. So a little bit of training and graft care can help solve some of those issues early in the life of the tree. I just wanted to mention that our state pecan show for 2019 was judged. It's normally displayed at the Oklahoma Pecan Growers Association meeting. That was canceled this year due to the virus, but I have listed the best in show was a mohawk, and that's what the picture is. But I've got the results online at the pecan webpage, and if you're interested, all of the top winning entries were exhibited by Hoffman's Pecans this year. We had a lot of great entries, and you can see how you did or how your neighbors did, and look at the details of these samples on that link. I'll be sending out ribbons and a list of results to those that entered their pecans in the show also soon. Right before I get off, I want to make sure that everyone that can apply for this food assistance program, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, CFAP, we talked about it in depth last month on our Zoom. You can go back and listen to that if you're interested, but the deadline is August 28th. So I would recommend you get with your FSA office as soon as possible to see if you qualify for any of this program. But August 28th is the deadline. Just want to show you these. This is the web page for pecan management. okpecans.okstate.edu has links to all our fact sheets, information about any news that's happening. It has videos of grafting and leaf sampling, harvesting, fertilizer, all different kinds of things. A resource that you can find a lot of information. And you can also find the way to contact me and some other of our specialists as well. The Pecan Facebook page is at OKPecans, and I try to keep that updated with what I'm seeing out in the field at the research station or news that's coming in from around the state. I do want to mention that we've went ahead and scheduled Zoom meetings for the rest of this year. So we have one August 7th, September 11th, October 2nd, and November 6th. Each one you'll have to re-register for to get the link, but we would love to have everyone join us for each of these other webinars and Zoom meetings that we have scheduled. All right, so now I'm gonna stop sharing and we're gonna move on to, let's see, how about Dr. Phil? You want to talk about pecan weevil first? We have Phil Mulder.
Sure, I can do that.
We have Phil Mulder. He is our pecan entomologist. He's a department head and entomologist there at the Entomology and Plant Pathology Department on campus.
Okay, I always have trouble getting my screen shared, so be patient with me.
Okay.
I'm
seeing your email, Phil.
Yeah, I
So,
don't know why. Don't check those out.
now I'm seeing a whole lot of
stuff.
green things. Can you click on your PowerPoint down at the bottom? Is that?
Yeah, just a second.
Anybody have any questions before Phil talks? Anybody in the chat? I didn't get a chance to see what was going on. Okay, I'll read through some of these as he's getting ready. Yeah, HLA means Horticulture Landscape Architecture. That's the name of our department. Let's see, Sarah, on a large tree, sometimes you have to get up into the back of a pickup. And like Phil said, have something to pull those limbs down. I don't recommend putting a ladder in the back of a pickup, but I know some people have used a front end loader to lift people up in there, but you have to use some common sense on how you're getting up into the tree. But yeah, this past season, they pruned all of the limbs, the lower limbs at the research station up higher, and so it makes it a lot more difficult for me to take my samples. But we have a kind of a cherry picker and a lift that gets us up a little bit higher, so that helps with us. Caleb mentioned graft shading. If small trees are planted between mature trees, how much full light is needed, full sunlight? It's best if they have sunlight, but you just don't want it like crowding it and just right on top of that tree. So if it's getting some filtered sunlight, it's probably going to be okay. You can kind of tell by the growth of those trees if it's enough or not. But yeah, they do need full sun. Pecans are sun-loving plants. All right, Phil, you want to?
Do you see me? Are my slides on there yet?
Yes, you just need to click on the
Slideshow.
slideshow. Yes.
Yeah. Let me find it here.
Should be down at the bottom right.
Yeah, I see it. There we go.
All right.
You see it now?
It's good.
Okay. So I've been asked to talk about pecan weevil biology, trapping, treatment, that sort of thing. We'll cover some other areas in subsequent sessions that we have, but today I want to just concentrate on pecan weevil. Now I'll review some of the pecan weevil information probably over the next 2 months, just simply because we don't really worry about pecan weevil too much until about August, mid to late August, and we don't get overly, especially when we have a good crop, we don't get overly concerned about a little bit of droppage that we see during the water stage, because once the weevil feeds during that water stage, the pecans just naturally seem to abort. This is what we, if we have this nice concentric hole in a pecan at the end of the season, generally speaking, this is nothing but pecan weevil. It's not anything else. And if you crack open that nut shell, you'll notice a sort of a red-headed grub. They actually used to be known as redheads for some reason, because they had that sort of reddish head. And they're grub-like. They're, kind of a creamy white to yellowish in color. And you may see as many as 2 to 4 per nut. So the female can lay quite a few eggs in each potential pecan out there. The adult is about 3/8 of an inch in length. The female snout is longer than its body, and the male's is considerably shorter. Heavy rainfall, like we're experiencing today in Stillwater, Oklahoma, usually causes the emergence of a heavy pecan weevil population, and pecans are susceptible from that dough stage to the shuck split. So this can be July to October. I wouldn't expect to see them this early, but we have seen them this early before. And so this is the time when I generally start recommending that people put out their pecan weevil circle traps. So, and we'll talk about those in a little bit more later on. So heavy rainfall like we're experiencing today may cause a few of the early pecan weevils to come out. The weevils can feed on the nuts in the water stage, but they don't lay eggs in watery pecans. Like I said before, those particular nuts will eventually abort from the tree. The oviposition or egg laying that occurs in the pecan weevil, like I said, it can start as early as the gel stage, but predominantly during that doe stage. And that would be probably past the mid-August time frame for just about any location that you're in Oklahoma. So that first part of August, when we're shaking improved cultivars, wouldn't worry about it too much at that point. Wouldn't worry about it right now, even though we're getting a very heavy rain and we might see a few weevils emerge. All they're going to do is feeding. Now, you say, well, what about all that feeding damage I might experience if I have hundreds of weevils? Well, the pecan weevil adult feeds on about a quarter of a nut per day. So over a 4-day period, it's going to affect one nut. So if you've got a pretty healthy crop, might not be a bad idea to let them have a few. You certainly don't want the weevil to be in control of thinning your crop. But during her life stage, the female will oviposit in 15 to 30 nuts. And like I said before, she'll lay anywhere from 2 to 4 eggs in each nut. And you can see the little eggs in this this one figure. There's 3 in that particular picture that are circled. Once again, multiple larvae. The larvae feed on for about, feed inside that nut, pretty much destroying it. If you are marketing to a retail situation, so like you've harvested all your pecans in your particular area and your situation is retail, you cannot afford to let customers see weevil-y pecans because they will not come back. The customer will not come back. The weevils will continue to be there. So they'll effectively destroy that entire kernel. So even if you have 1 or 2, you certainly don't want your customers to see that. If it's wholesale, it may not be as crucial because those will be thinned out by somebody else, someone else doing the cleaning job. After that 40 days or so, 32 to 42 days, the larvae will exit the nut after they've fed on and pretty much ruined the kernel. They will fall to the ground, or they may even wait until the nut has fallen to the ground and burrow into the soil anywhere from 4 to 12 inches. Most of them are found in that first 6 inches. But depending upon the soil type, if you have a sandier soil, they may go down a little further. Clay soil, they may not go down quite as far. They'll spend about 2 to 3 years in the soil. And the weird or the sort of funny thing about that is after that, they go through 4 instars. And after that 4th instar, they stop feeding. And people say, well, how do they live? Well, how do they live in that strong earthen cell? You see the little earthen cell around the pupal stage. And they basically are sipping oxygen. They're living on reserves that they've fed on before. Their metabolism has decreased by about 6 times. So they are, in essence, in almost like a cryogenic freeze, but not frozen, okay? After about 1 year, 90% of the population will go ahead and pupate. And the pupa may change at that time and will change in about 2 weeks into an adult. But that adult will not emerge until the next year. So it's been 2 years in the soil. 10% of the population will not even pupate until the 2nd year and wait for the 3rd year to emerge and turn into adults. And so 2 to 3 weeks, then emerge the following year. So that's the pupal stage that you see right there. It kind of looks like a sarcophagus or something of that nature. And people have often asked, well, how can I control this by putting something in the soil? We've tried that at like 4x rate and with no success because this hard earthen cell is almost impenetrable by an insecticide. So very tough to try to control that weevil in the pupal stage or even in the larval stage to some extent once they've built that earthen cell, especially if it's a clay soil. The recommendation that we have right now is about this time of year, and I say about this time of year, we usually install our circle traps about mid-July, just in case we have that early flush of pecan weevil. We install two circle traps per tree, or at least make sure, if you've got a small tree, make sure that one goes around the entire trunk. And based on extrapolation of capture numbers and the comparison to the wire cone emergence traps a study we did several years ago, the treatment threshold when you're using 2 circle traps per tree on 10 trees is 0.3 weevils per trap per day. And we'll go over that in just a moment and what that means. Pecan Ag Equipment has, in Bristow, sells the circle traps. It's actually Bill Isles' wife, Susan, who makes these. And I believe they go for about $18 to $20 a piece. So, but certainly worth it. What we recommend is you trap on 10 trees in a given area where you have similar soil types, similar age of trees, and similar soil in particular, because if you have a sandy soil in one area and a clay soil in another area, you want to treat those as almost 2 orchards. Now, the way that we come about this threshold, this 0.3 weevils per trap per day when using two circle traps on 10 trees, this is kind of a conservative approach, but it will vary depending upon the prices that we see out there for pecans. But basically, this is our approach. Weevils per trap per day is the total number of weevils from X traps. Now, keep in mind, I'm saying traps, not trees at this point. So we've got the 2 traps on each tree. And so let's say you have the 10 trees with 20 traps on them, and you caught nothing on a Monday, but on a Wednesday, they caught 12 weevils. Therefore, you divide 12 by 20 times 2. In other words, the number of traps times the number of days that you've gone without capturing anything, and that equals 0.3 weevils per trap per day. So the number 2 represents the number of days since your last check of the traps. And we've got more information on the following fact sheets. It's actually fact sheets EPP, start with the abbreviation EPP 7079 and 7190. And those will help you get some information on the traps as well as the weevil biology. Now, in terms of control considerations for pecan, it can be expensive. But the thing that I caution most growers is be aware of the cost per acre, because the material that you use may be priced similarly, but if you were using an old carbamate like 7XLR Plus or, well, which might be kind of a new carbamate, but still, it may run the same price as a gallon of lambda cyhalothrin. And actually, I did this analysis this morning at Stillwater Mill, and by the gallon, it was $61.99 for both 7XLR Plus and for lambda cyhalothrin. The only big difference is you're using 2 to 5 quarts of 7XLR versus 2.56 to 5.12 ounces per acre. So your cost in the case of the 7 is going to run you anywhere from almost $31 to $78. And for lambda cyhalothrin or lambda cy or warrior, or one of those kinds of pyrethroids, it's going to be only $1.21 per acre up to $2.48 per acre. So keep in mind, even though prices may be similar, look at that rate per acre and make sure you can put out that amount based on rate per acre. So the pyrethroids are pretty much the way that most people go. But the thing that you've got to be careful about is that pyrethroids can cause flare-ups in aphid populations. And we'll talk about that some today and then more in detail next month. Now, depending on the pest type, you may have to add in a spreader sticker with most things like pecan nut case bearer, webworms, things of that nature. We don't generally advise that with pecan weevil. So we like to kind of glop it on when it comes to pecan weevil. The weevil timing, of course, is variable depending upon moisture, but it's best to trap on indicator trees or early maturing varieties in sandier soils, keeping in mind that the maturity of that pecan is going to be a major determinant of when you make that first application. You're not going to make that first application while you're in the water stage, okay? Pyrethroid applications and aphid flare-ups. I said I'd talk about that a little bit, and I'll talk about it more next month too. If you're applying pyrethroids early, say like July to early September, consider mixing it with an aphicide. And if you were at the OPGA meeting last year, I talked about a few aphicides that we tested in 2018. And the nice thing about the aphicides that we have out there right now is that they're all different modes of action. So if you're using something like Closer or PQZ or Fulfill or something of that nature, they're sort of a mixture of different modes of action. So be careful about what you select, and don't use the same thing 2 times in a row if you're concerned about aphids. And we are going to be very concerned about aphids as we get into this hot, dry weather. We're not experiencing that at the moment, but we're going to experience it real soon. For organic growers, you can use this Grandivo. Now, Grandivo is marketed right now as a wettable dry granule formulation, but it's very expensive. And I say it's marketed right now. They have come up with a liquid formulation, and we'll be looking at that in 2020. So we've got a trial planned for 2020. We looked at it last year and in the granular formulation, and I'll show you some results here in just a moment. But keep in mind, if you're using this material, and it is very expensive, you may be making as many as 2 to 4 applications if you have heavy weevil populations. So you better be really getting a tremendous premium for your pecans if you're going organic at this point. But they're aware of this situation with the price of Grandivo. So hopefully, once they settle out between the granular formulation and the liquid formulation, they'll lower the price. It's a product that's available through Marone, which is a biological control type of company. Okay, so in 2019, we had a weevil insecticide trial where we evaluated 2 traditional insecticides and 1 microbial biopesticide, which was the Grandivo. We had 1 cultivar that we administered these treatments in at the Cimarron Valley Research Station. It was Kansas. 4 replications of 4 trees per treatment. Both myself and Kelly Seuss and Jimmy Carroll were a part of this trial on the research station. And the first application was based on tree phenology. So we waited until the day stage to make that application, the dough stage, to make that application. So the first application was August 22nd, 2019. I thought it was a little bit early, but we went ahead and pulled the trigger. The second application was based on label recommendations and harvest interval, but the thresholds were not obtained by that time. So we also, at that time, tank mixed in PQZ because we were seeing some pretty high aphid numbers at 3 ounces per acre. And that second application was made on September 10th. Once again, I thought that was a little bit early, but because of the harvest interval for one of the materials that we were looking at, we had to pull the trigger a little bit early. Fortunately or unfortunately, maybe neither one for 2019, because weevil infestations that year on the station were not quite as bad. But like I say, fortunately or unfortunately, we had 12.73 inches of rain in August and September, highly unusual, and especially 9.86 inches in August. The damage by pecan weevil was assessed at harvest on October 23rd by collecting a 5-gallon bucket sample on the center 2 trees within each treatment and within each replication. So we had several bags of pecans and had to go through those individually. After those were dried to 4.2% moisture, a 200 nut random sample was selected for visual evaluation of damage, involving a lot of work by Kelly Seuss to hand crack these nuts and assess if they had weevil or shuckworm damage. So we were looking at shuckworm damage as well. And here are the results of that trial at Perkins in 2019. I'd like to say the trial was a success, and that Grandivo even at the lower rate, did a fantastic job, because it seemed to be the best treatment. but there's no statistical difference between any of the treatments and the untreated check. So what does this mean for that particular trial? It means the Perkins Research Station is doing an excellent job of controlling pecan weevil. And so we don't have enough of an infestation. So what we're trying to do this year is perhaps get a different location with a reliability for a heavier infestation. And you can see the shuckworm, it was the same story too. So relatively low numbers of pecan weevil and pecan weevil damage. So not anything I would hang my hat on as far as making a recommendation for these organic methods like Grandivo at either 2 pound or 3 pound. Okay, the other materials are Warrior. I think most of you are familiar with. It's the lambda cyhalothrin, and the Menecto Pro is a product. Oh gosh, let me see. Syngenta, yeah, Syngenta makes that product, and it's a combination product of a diamide and a chloride channel activator. So a little bit different mode of action, and it did okay as well. So, but more of the traditional types of insecticides compared to the organic choice. So the theme here is fear no weevil, right? We don't want to fear that weevil because we need to go after it and go after them aggressively. It's probably going to take you at least 2 applications. Keep in mind, the first application should be after the water stage, preferably into the dough stage. The second application should be determined based upon threshold, utilizing circle traps. And that's what we're shooting for. Maybe not that many pecans, because that many pecans will not fill adequately. I think that was 74 pecans. And that was, yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, we don't see that typically. Okay, any questions? Was there anything in the chat that I need to look at?
I don't think we got any chat on Weevil. We may have some questions in a little bit.
Okay, so be on the lookout for everything. You know, everything is active right now, including webworms. So hopefully you've made some applications for case bearer and are avoiding webworms. But we'll talk about some aphids and some other things like walnut detaina at the next session.
All right, can you stop sharing? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so I think next we're going to have Charles talk about water requirements for pecan. And we may run a little bit over an hour today. I'm trying to keep it close to an hour, but we may run over just a little bit. But Charles Rohla with the Noble Research Institute is going to give us some updates on how much we actually need to be watering our pecan trees. All right. Are you good to go there, Charles?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
Oh, that's all right. I can see your presentation is up and looks good.
Okay, so you know, in
Charles,
Oklahoma,
Charles, you didn't need your afternoon nap today?
No, I didn't. I'm not quite that old yet. So in Oklahoma, you know, if you're planting a new orchard, we generally suggest that you install irrigation. And the biggest reason is, you know, we get a lot of rainfall in Oklahoma, but we do not get enough rainfall to satisfy what a tree needs to produce a full crop. And the other thing is we don't get the rain whenever we need it. So I was going to share with you, you know, a little bit about water and some of the requirements. Through research, we generally say that pecans require around 55 inches of rain or water per growing season. You know, in some research out of Western and New Mexico has shown that mature pecan trees can use up to 100 to 200 gallons of water per day. So if you think about some of the size of our trees, especially our natives, that might even be 300 to 400 gallons per day. There are really 5 critical times in development that tree needs water. And it really starts really early in the season, right at bud break, at the initiation of shoot growth. That's really critical to get that good growth, start to grow those new shoots. The next development stage is crop set, just as those nuts are being pollinized, and that pollination time, so kind of mid-May. And then during nut sizing, which is occurring right now, and I'll show you here in a minute, if you have water stress on the trees, it's going to affect nut size. And then during kernel fill, late July through September, if you have water stress on the trees, you're also affecting how well that kernel is going to fill, and your pecans won't be as high percent kernel. And then one thing a lot of growers overlook is the importance of water at shuck split time. And I'll share with you some problems you can have at shuck split if you don't have adequate water on the trees. Another thing, these last three really from right now through harvest, if you are lacking in water and those trees are stressed, you're also affecting next year's crop. So you want to keep that in mind. Some of the issues we see with water stress is those wafery pecans or just poor filled pecans. I'm sure a lot of you, if you've cracked open pecans, have seen some that has a lot of fuzz on the kernels. That's due to water stress. And then nut size. With water stress trees, you're going to have smaller nuts. You're going to have smaller leaves, smaller shoots. And the smaller leaves, smaller shoots are going to play a role in next year's crop. So if you have less leaves, smaller shoots, it's going to affect next year's crop too. If you've got young trees, water stress, you're going to see some small yellow leaves. If it's really severe, they're going to get crispy, toasty, actually burnt. And you can actually lose, especially young trees, to water stress. During harvest, or during that harvest time, water stress is going to cause a lot more stick tights. We see this especially out west, where they're irrigating and they turn their irrigation off too early, and then the nuts will not open, the shucks won't open and let the nuts fall out. So you're going to have that shuck stick to the nut, and it's really almost impossible to get it off, and so you don't have a sellable product. Another problem you see is viviparity with certain cultivars. This is pre-germination. This is where the nuts are staying inside the shuck, and we have hot temperatures during harvest, and then that nut will actually germinate on the tree, and that nut you cannot sell. It's not edible. The other problem you'll have with water stress during harvest is erratic shuck split, where you might have a few nuts opening up on the tree, but if the trees are really stressed, the tree won't open up uniformly, and so it makes harvest a lot harder. And then that's where you run into more problems with especially viviparity. And that's just a few of the problems you can see with water stress. Here's a diagram of what can happen to your nuts with water stress at different times of the year. So the top, you'll see kind of normal nut shape. If you have water stress anytime throughout the year, you have reduced size, but usually normal shape. If you have water stress during that nut sizing period, usually June through July, you're going to have reduced size, but that nut will be a little rounder. If it's during that kernel fill, late July, August, maybe even here September, depending on the cultivar, you're going to have a reduced size, but you're also going to have this misshaped nut, where it's a little skinnier on one end, because that's the way it's not filling all the way to that end. And so you can see differences in nut shape just due to water stress. And here's an example from Kansas, from Dr. Bill Reed, some nuts he harvested. I believe the large nut on your left was in an irrigated orchard. The other ones were less water, and then the small one was in a non-irrigated orchard, and they're all Kansas, but you can see the size difference. And the trees, I believe, are all the same age. So that's how drought or water stress can affect the size of your nuts. So generally, if you're irrigating, or even if you're just hand watering trees, we get asked a lot, well, how much water do we need to apply? And generally, it's going to really depend on your soil type. You know, if you've got a sandy soil, you're going to have to apply more water. If you've got a clay soil, you're going to have to be careful not to overwater, especially if you're hand watering. But this is a general guideline on height of the tree or age of tree and how many gallons per day you need to be applying. If you have an irrigation system, Dr. Lenny Wells out of Georgia has developed this, and he actually tested this on his own private orchard and come up with these guidelines. And you can see early in the season, you don't have as many leaves, so there's not as much photosynthesis occurring. So you don't have to have as much water per tree or per day. He's got it at 16 to 20% of the capacity. But as the season goes on and you get into really August, that kerner fill, you really need to be having that system running 100% capacity to be able to fill the nuts that you have on the trees. And the other thing that does is help with next year's crop, because you're keeping that tree from stressing from filling the nuts that you have on the trees as they're trying to set the next year's crop inside the tree. And you can see even late season, right at harvest in October, it's still up to 40% of capacity. We still need that moisture in the soil. Whenever you talk about irrigation, there's a lot of different ways to deliver water to your trees, whether it's solid sprinklers, that's irrigating 100% of the orchard floor, to what we see a lot of growers are going with micro sprinklers. We have a few that's doing subsurface drip, and it all depends on how you know, you want to do it. Things to keep in mind is maybe your water source. I've had a couple of growers that are irrigating out of rivers or ponds, so a large sprinkler is a better method because then your filtration cost is less. If you're pumping out of a well, you might go with drip or micro sprinkler where you don't have to worry about filtration as much, unless you're pumping a lot of sand. The one thing I encourage you to do as you're designing, or if you have an irrigation system, work with the irrigation specialist. They can help you design a system, help you solve some problems, and make sure you're working with somebody that knows and understands pecans. That's something that a lot of irrigation specialists are used to turf grass, and so their methods are a little different we would with pecans. And one last thing I want to say, make sure you test your water. We've had a problem with some of our research trees, and it went back to water. We thought it was a fungus, and what it is our water is high in bicarbonates, and so it's tying up nutrients, and so it's making the trees defoliate, and it looks like a nutrient problem, but it's all goes back to our water quality. So make sure you're testing your water to make sure you have good quality. And if you're using the irrigation system, I'd highly encourage you to use some kind of soil moisture sensor to help you determine when you need to irrigate. This can save you a lot of money. A couple years ago, we didn't have to run our system all year up until right before harvest because we had good soil moisture, even though we were drying out in the top 2 inches, 6 inches to 12 inches down, we have plenty of moisture. And so that allowed us to keep our irrigation off and save us money. Well, Becky, I tried to run pretty quick there, but if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Anybody have any questions for Charles at this time? You can put them in the chat or you can speak up either way. All right. Well, if you think of something, go ahead and type it in the chat box if you want, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. Next, we have Wesley from, I forgot what your title was, Wes, I'm sorry. He works with Mesonet, but he's actually with Oklahoma State University. His office is actually on the OU campus at the National Weather Service. But we'll have Wes talk to us a little bit about some of the Mesonet helps that we have as pecan growers and some things that are going to help us with with dealing with disease and other issues. So Wes, you want to share your screen?
Okay, glad to be here today. Becky, it should be pulling up.
I don't see anything just yet. There it is. It's coming now.
You tell me when everything looks good.
It's still, it just
Are we
says
good
you're
to go?
sharing. It's still sharing. So did you select your presentation and push share after that?
I did. How about now?
I'm still not seeing it.
Okay.
Anybody else seeing anything yet? No.
No, not yet.
Okay. So
You know, we're having some issues with connectivity. I don't think it's from my end, but
are you having
Becky, if it
trouble?
doesn't,
Are you
well,
having-
there's a lot of audio issues.
Okay. I was hearing Charles just fine, but your audio's a little broken, Wes. It's still not showing up. Can you try to stop and try to share again?
Okay, let's.
Yeah, you may need to, you might could email me the file and I could see if I could share it if it's not going to work. Oh, here we go. It's working. Now I can see it
There
fine.
you go.
Yeah.
We got something up now.
Yes, it's up.
Up and running.
Okay. All right. I won't try to play the slideshow because that's where it locked it up the last time. Again, I'm Wesley. I'm with the Oklahoma Mesonet here in Norman, but work with Oklahoma State University, and I'll try to be brief here. I just wanted to mention a couple of programs on our Mesonet slides or Mesonet website that might be of help to you. First of all, we'll talk about the Scab Advisor and a couple of kind of guidelines before we jump into that. First of all, it is a seasonal program. It only runs from March 1 to August 31, and it's based on infection hours. Research showing that infection hours accumulate anytime we have an hour with a relative humidity of 90% or higher, along with temperatures at 70 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. It also makes the assumption that fungicides protection will last 14 days once you put it on. It updates every hour, and there's a forecast portion of it that's supposed to update every 4 times a day. But I'll tell you that the National Weather Service, you may have noticed if you've been on our website, all of the forecast information is acting a little bit funny. They're having some severe issues right now with the National Weather Service. Okay, this easiest way to get to our Pecan Scab program is go to our website at mesonet.org. Once you're there, you can click on that agriculture tab where you can see the blue button is, and then a link at that bottom blue line will take you straight to the Pecan Scab portion of the website. Once you're there, this is what the Pecan Scab Advisor looks like. There are 4 options, those green circles on the left of your screen. We'll start with going through the statewide maps of that. I'm going to back up. Once you select that, since I don't have my PowerPoint going, it's going to ask you, do you want to look at the whole season or you just want to look at the last 14 days? And most of the time, I just focus on the last 14 days when we're using this tool. So this is an example of what the tool looked like as of this morning. As you can see, there are a lot of infection hours, especially in the far southeast, and that's usually the case. But just about anywhere except the far northwest and the Panhandle is having some issues with pecan scab buildup right now. So that's the 14-day statewide map view. You can also take a look at it with a local, one individual Mesonet site. This is, I've selected Lane here to take a look at. You can look at either graphs or you can look at table format. So let's look at a graph for Lane. It's down there in that southeast where we are getting a lot of infection hours. So you can see from the red portion of this graph, that is the 14-day accumulation. So a little over 100 hours of accumulation over the last 14 days at Lane there, which is quite a few infection hours. The blue part of that graph, that is the forecast model. And you can see that that forecast is kind of the slope of that line is flattened out. Sound like we're talking about COVID-19, but the slope is flattened out because the National Weather Service is expecting the extreme heat to keep that humidity level from being able to reach 90% going forward. But if we keep getting these pop-up showers like we had the last 2 days, that forecast may not be right. Now, that's the 14-day look at an individual site. So I'm going back now to the main part of the web page, and I know this looks funny because it's not in PowerPoint mode right now, but the third green box on the left side would have been Spray Drift Advisor. And on this advisor, you select the station you want to look at. Again, I'm going to stay with Lane, and then to the right of the screen, you have to do two things. One is you have to select your pecan variety or select a category. Once you, if you don't know what your variety is going to fit in the way of categories, there is an instruction sheet on the website that shows that it divides the varieties into 3 different categories. Now, this might be a little bit dated, and we need to get Charles or somebody to take a look at it and make sure it's up to date. But the important part of the brown part of that table is the scab hours that it needs to require to spray. So there's 10 hours under the highly susceptible, all the way down to 30 hours on the low susceptible type varieties. The last thing you have to plug in here is it's mentioned as start date, but for most of us, that's going to be the spray date or the last time you put a fungicide application on. Remember, we make the assumption that your fungicide application is going to last for 14 days after you put it on. So once I hit get data, we'll stay with Lane. It's going to generate a page that looks similar to this. Remember, the date I put in there was June 23rd as our last spray date. So we mark off 14 days after that. It starts calculating degree days from July the 7th on from there. Remember, on that variety chart that popped up, it was either 10, 20, or 30 hours, depending on the susceptibility. We picked the moderate, so it would have been 20 hours. So anytime you accumulate 20 hours or more, it's going to recommend spraying, as you can see here in the upper left-hand side of the deal. Now, the decision is based upon the infection hours, but it goes ahead and gives you the forecast model as well, because if you happen to be on the borderline of trying to decide whether or spray to not, that 3.5-day forecast can help you decide whether or not you need to go ahead and pull the trigger and put that spray application on. Now, this is Lane, but if we jumped up the state and looked at Perkins with the same spray date and the same variety, you would see that we just don't have enough infection hours based on these criteria to spray at Perkins. So it's a good idea, to be sure you get the site closest to you to take a look at. Now, a spray advisory, in my opinion, is just a reference point or a starting point to where you need to make decisions on. There are things going on in your individual orchard that could vary greatly upon what this model says. One is how far away you are from the Mesonet tower. 2 is how thick your trees are planting, how much sunlight, how much air movement, and your history, age of trees. There's a lot of things that go into it, but this model can be used as a starting point in helping you decide when you need to spray or do something. Okay, going back to the main web page, there's only one part left. That would be the past years to do a comparison. Again, you can do graphs or you can do tables with that. We'll stick with the graph view, and you can see for Lane, the the green part of the graph is 2020. So we can see this year, we're actually falling right in between where we were on the last 2 years, between 2018 and 2019 on infection hours at that location. So it's good, if you had a lot of trouble last year or in 2018, and you want to kind of compare where we're setting right now based on the year that you had a lot of trouble, this is a good place to take a look at. Now, lastly, I want to leave you with another portion of the webpage that can be real helpful to you. The rains we got the last couple of days over part of the state are great. They're probably not going to make a very big dent into the drought monitor or the drought maps for the state of Oklahoma. The forecast for the next couple of weeks is really hot and really dry going forward. So we expect this map to expand as we go forward, unfortunately. In the state. This is available on the ag portion of the website as well. It is updated every Thursday morning at about 7:30 in the morning. Most of the FSA financial assistance programs don't kick in until we reach that red category or the D3 category. There's not but about 4% in the state right now, but we expect that to expand dramatically over the next couple of weeks if those forecast models are correct as we go forward. So that's just two small places on the website that I think are useful to you as pecan growers. Of course, you can get all of the weather information such as winds and rainfall data as well at the Mesonet. My contact information is right on the front page of the mesonet.org website. So if there's something I can help you with, be sure to let us know. So Becky, I'm going to try to stop sharing here.
Thank you so much, Wes. That's really good information. I think it's a helpful tool for all of our pecan growers to help them make those decisions on if they need to be thinking about applying a fungicide or not. Like you said, you have to take into consideration your site, your varieties, how, your past history with scab pressure, all those things can come into play. Actually keeping your orchard mowed and your limbs trimmed up is going to help some with that scab pressure as well. Charlie, would you like to add anything to our scab discussions?
I will see. Can you hear me on this mic?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. I've got 4 different mics. I found one that works. So, on the scab and everything, you'd asked me a little bit if I'd update you on kind of how the Southeast has been looking right now. And in the Southeast, as James was talking about, they've had a lot of wet weather, but actually they're doing a really good job of controlling scab in most of the Southeast. The only variety they were really reporting any problems with was on Wichita. Had some scab on it, but most of the Pawnees and things like that are staying pretty clean. As far as June drop, it was fairly heavy as you move southeast. It wasn't as heavy here in the Ardmore area. Seemed to be a fairly light June drop here. So what we had on the trees is still there for right now. And as you were showing pictures of things sizing up, we're sizing up, rapidly here as well. As far as fungicides, I'm not sure what everyone's been using. I've had a number of growers have been using some of the newer fungicides like Maravis Top and have been reporting very good success with it. We've got one grower sprayed it a couple of times now, and his nuts are totally clean, so it seems to be working exceptionally well. Just remember that on your fungicides, not to use any fungicide more than twice in a row, and make sure you're rotating your chemistries and everything to make sure those will stay with us for the future. But outside of that, that's kind of the way things have been going down here. If we get the hot weather that's forecast to come the next couple of weeks, that should even reduce any scab chances even more. So, but as the soils dry out, we may need to start the irrigation like Charles was talking about and ramp that up a little bit more. But in the Southeast, I talked to a couple of growers over there. They still have standing water in the orchards here and there. And so it's quite wet to the Southeast.
All right. Well, there were areas in the northeastern part of the state last year that stayed flooded for months at a time. And if we looked at that drought map that Wes showed, a lot of those areas are in the area that has not had any rainfall or very much. So I'm kind of concerned about those trees that have stayed wet for so long, maybe losing some of their root mass.
Yeah, if you have a high water table and everything, and that water table is high for most of last year, it easily can, kill the deeper roots because they just can't get enough oxygen. And so now you've got a shallow rooted tree. And as you said, you start moving into drought and that water table drops below the root system. And if you don't have irrigation on those trees, it'd be a lot like probably 2011. I know in Louisiana, we had a lot of trees die in 2011, and we had a very similar situation where we were wet the first half of the year and had high water tables in some areas. And then when the drought hit, everything dropped. All the water tables went down several feet, and the trees just couldn't get any water and just didn't have the root system to get it. So. And
it got so hot that year also, I know. I have a question here in the chat. It says, Micro says, what category is this new fungicide that you mentioned?
The Mesonet top is actually 2 different chemistries. It's group 3 and also a group 7, if I remember right, for the Mesonet top. And another one that people have been using is Amistar. That's, I think, 11 and a 3. But most of the new chemistries that have come out all have a group 3 difenoconazole in it. And then usually a group 11 or a group 7 with it.
So does that put you in more chance of building up resistance if some of these have multiple?
Well, I mean, they're putting 2 in there and they're hoping to take out different populations, but I've always been concerned about it because when you start getting mixtures like that, often they reduce the amount of each one slightly. So you're putting on a low dose of each one, and that's always concerned me. If someone wants to use, 2 different chemistries at the same time, I'd rather they use full strength and just make their own instead of buying a product that already has both in it, because then you can spray them both at full strength. But I still believe in spraying, 1 chemistry at a time. I would use the group 3, and then I would spray a group 11 or a group 30. I like keeping them separate.
Options, right?
Yeah, I like doing them like that, but more and more we're seeing most of the chemicals that are coming out are usually 2 products together. Okay. There's one that's just came out that's going to be a group 3 and a group 46, which is basically tea tree oil. So you're seeing unique things come out there, but trying to mix different products together and everything. So, but I like to say, I believe in rotating the chemistries, and I like using them by themselves generally. But like I say, I can't ignore how well some of these new products have worked, like the Mesonet top. I mean, everything that we've seen so far has looked exceptionally good on it.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Charles or Phil, Wes, Charlie, anything, or myself? I think Dr. Lou Zhang she may be on as well today. And hi, Willie. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about right before? We've got just a few minutes before we need to head out, I think. But you have anything you'd like to share with the group?
Yes, I just would like to mention a little bit about one thing is about the summer drought. So now we are we needed to be careful about the summer drought, and we know especially for the end of July and August, our nuts are in the water stage. So we call that a water stage because we have liquids inside the nuts. Mm-hmm. That is the endosperm, they are in a liquid stage, and those endosperm, they will, provide the nutrients to the embryo to well develop an embryo. So in the summer, if we are short of the water, that could probably, you cannot have a well developed embryo. So maybe in the next time, I will talk about how does a flower that develop into, not a flower, how does your pecan nuts developed from a flower. So now, short of water, you could probably very easily, reduce the production. You will have the fruit drop. And our research team now will focus on using the soil moisture sensors and the pressure chambers to test the water potential of the trees. So we hopefully, next time we can provide some information for you to use to quantify the water use for the summer.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
That'd be good. Yeah, and if you have an orchard that you're thinking about planting, and water is going to be a limiting factor. You don't have enough water to apply like you know you're going to have to. Using a smaller pecan is going to be helpful in that situation. The larger the nut, the harder it is to fill out properly, right?
Yes.
So a smaller nut like Kanza or Caddo, some of those that are smaller on the size are easier to fill than something like a Mohawk, or something that never fills out properly is like a Podsednik because it is so large. So if you know you're going to have water as a limiting factor, you want to consider using some of those smaller type of cultivars that would work better.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right, any other questions from anyone? I appreciate everyone joining in today. I know it's been a little bit longer than we intended, but we just have a lot of information to share. And since we're only meeting together monthly, it's hard to get everything packed into 1 hour. Want to thank you again, and put on your calendar, August 7th will be our next Zoom. It will be at 1 o'clock again, and I'll be sending out notices to everyone who's registered for this this Zoom and the previous 2 Zooms. I'll send out an email so you'll know that it's happening, and so you can register. But each one you'll have to register for separately. But unless anyone has a question, I guess we're going to end for today. And I miss you guys. I wish I could see everybody. It's been a while since I've got to see all of my pecan friends. So hopefully we'll be able to join together soon again. So thank you so much, and we'll see you later.
Thank you, Becky.
All right, thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lou.
Turn it off. It's over.
Thanks, Charlie, everybody. Bye, Maria. Appreciate everybody tuning in.
Another good job.
Thanks, Charlie. We'll see you later.
All right.